The Cleveland Browns preseason starts tomorrow, man. The game is almost here. We're going to see the Browns in their actual uniforms, actually tackling, actually doing something that resembles actual football. We're so close. We are so close, but so far away, but so close. We're so close. We're so close. And with us being this close and with it being the start of the preseason and this very weird preseason that we've never really experienced before with one less game and all these undefined rules that are going to have to be reorganized because, usually we're used to the 4 preseason game structure, which is like maybe a drive the first game for the starters, then like maybe a quarter and a half for the second game, maybe in half, maybe some in the third quarter for the starters in the third game, and then no starters in the fourth game. It's usually what the rotation is for the starters in the preseason. This year it's going to be all out of whack, and with that comes a ton of questions. But before I get into those questions, I want to make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and ding that notification bell. Why do I want you guys to do that? Because I'm doing a live watch along of both preseason games as a way to kind of prepare myself to do live watch alongs of all the regular season games this year. So if you want to get a preview, if you want to watch the game with me, of what these streams are going to be like, and they're going to be what I feel like are a significant upgrade than what the live watch along experience was last year. So if you enjoyed that, you'll really enjoy what we're doing this year with the live watch along experience. It's so much better than last year's. I've upgraded the entire setup. I'm excited about it, but you have to tune in to see it. It's going to be live. We're going to go live about 15 minutes before the game, so about 6:45 on Saturday. So make sure you're here. Make sure you're subscribed, and make sure you're notified so you get the notification once I go live to make sure you don't miss it. Watch the game along with me. It's going to be a fun time. Please check it out. I am looking forward to it greatly. And also, I got to give a shout out to the patreon.com dog check tier members. I'm going to start with Michael Matique, Nick Merrick, Mike Lapa, Wesson Megan, Tyler Chiz, D.A. Jade, Easley Bash, Joe Hart, Gabriel Wilson, Fred Pratt III, David Valtiar, Relentless Buck, Chunt, Rex Kaufman, Kevin Johnson, DJ Marino V, Edward Carpenter, Matt H, Sign Sheets, Gemini, Liam Freeman, Fight Dirty 74, Yo, Matt Lloyd, Paul Wilcox, Hundo Magnifico, Kyle Stuffer, Lukey from Munich, Deveroff, J Guy 101, Musty Taco, Joe Bobby, Brad Cabo, Dylan W, James McGinley, Arenda Hall, Chad Gimme, David Maldonado, Dylan Hell, Josh Bendorch, Jaleel Salim Jr., Mark M, TJ Showman, Stuart Moore, Cleveland BCI, Robert Jermaine Jr., Dave, Mike May, Andrew Hirsch, Curtis Byer, Batman, Bharat Kumar, John Albert, Beerman069, Masayua Buzzer, Roland James, Nemo, Mac House, Reeve Hertz, Philip Wilcox, Marie Vivert, Sean Barron, Goggles Pisano, Corporal Nick Lopez, Dom Gazzulo, Nick Nasty, Ian Whitaker, Colin 216 Christian, Dave Strong, Michael Stone, Billy Moose Gentry, Austin Z, Mark Burnett II, Andre Griffin, Otis Wolf, Dog Pound, Kai Greg Ehlers, Austin Bowling, Lydia Mahawk, Jesus Serrano, Chris Foams, the Picktown Browns backers, Max Neelakenko, Mark Khan, Max Al Dojo, and Water Bear Marketing. Again, guys, thank you so much for the support. It really means a ton to me. Now let's jump into the video. All right, so as I alluded to at the beginning of this video, we're at a really weird point with this preseason where like each team is going to have their own rules on how they're going to handle this when we've had a system in place that kind of was universal when it came to handling these 4 preseason games, right? There used to be a kind of structure to this. Now with 3, everybody's creating their own structure. In about 5 years, then everybody will be doing the same thing. And it's going to be really interesting to see what teams do with these 3 preseason games, because I do think widely it's going to be a reflection on what coaches have noticed and have deemed necessary and useless about the preseason, the way it had been done. Because again, we're coming off a year where there was no preseason games and they had to play an entire season. And honestly, the product wasn't that different than when there was preseason games. There are some numbers that suggest the product was actually better than when there was preseason games. So it's going to be interesting just on that level to see what teams do. Maybe some teams don't even put their starters out there at all. I don't don't know what teams are doing this year. It's up in the air. But for the Browns, we know some things about what they're going to do tomorrow, and some things are going to be interesting to watch tomorrow. The first thing to know before you tune into this preseason game so you don't get disappointed is the big name starters are not going to be out there, right? The Myles Garretts, the Baker Mayfields, Denzel Wards, the Odell Beckhams, the Jarvis Landrys, the Nick Chubbs, and Kareem Hunt. Pretty much the entire offense probably not going to be out there, and most of the defense, they're not going to be out there. Why are they doing this? Well, offensively, it makes a ton of sense, right? Because they have already had a season together. They're coming back and returning under this offense. They had a ton of wrinkles added in at the later part of the year. They have had reps on top of reps with that exact unit already, so they don't really need the live game reps that you're going to get in the preseason because there's really not as much to gain out of it, or at least not more than what they deem the risk is. So you're probably not going to see a ton of the offense in the preseason if that's the mindset. Now, with the defense, it's a little bit of a different situation. Defensive line guys, especially like Myles Garrett, really don't need to play in the preseason. Their job doesn't change no matter what the scheme is. Get the quarterback, right? And with a guy like Jadeveon Clowney, you really don't want to see him play in the preseason because you already know that it feels like you have like a limited amount of games that you can use him for, and you don't want to waste any of those games in the preseason. Same thing with a guy like Denzel Ward, who has an extensive injury history. So you're going to want to be more cautious than you are with them. Now, there will be some positions where you will see starters playing out there. I would assume linebacker. I would even assume safety, right? I think you might see John Johnson out there a fair bit just because he needs to be out there to kind of dictate where that defense is going to go. Get some of these other things I'm going to talk about later with the secondary down pat. So no big name starters. Don't go out, don't turn on this game and expect to see Baker Mayfield throwing the ball to Odell Beckham. You're not going to see that. You're going to see Case Keenum throwing the ball to Rashard Higgins and Donovan Peoples-Jones, which brings me into number 2, which means that the fact that the starters aren't going to be playing is actually a good thing because you get to get your eye on some of these key young players that are going to be important for the Browns' future. So you're not getting 4 quarters of Odell Beckham probably in the preseason. You're probably not getting a single quarter of Odell Beckham, but that does mean you get a really long and really valuable look at a guy like Donovan Peoples-Jones with some extended snaps and responsibilities. Same thing goes with JOK. Same goes to that competition with Greedy Williams and Greg Newsome. They're going to be out there simultaneously. I think that's actually really good for that competition. We know Denzel Ward's going to start and be the number 1 corner, but who's going to start number 2? Well, you're going to have them both on the field, Greedy and Greg Newsome on opposite sides. You're probably going to switch who they're on every once in a while, and you're going to want to see how they do in coverage and see which one's holding up better. I think that's excellent. Mac Wilson's another guy that's going to be interesting to watch, right? That's been on this bubble, it's been kind of worried about for a while. Those are going to be some interesting things to watch, especially along the defense. There are some things on the offense. Harrison Bryant, Donovan Peoples-Jones, you're going to want to keep an eye on because they are key for the future. But on the defense, you're going to have younger players who are expected to start and kind of contribute early, and you're going to want to see where those players are and if they're playing at an NFL level yet. And since most of those players are in the secondary, it kind of brings me to my next point, which is you're going to be able to put this communication to the test, right? The communication in the secondary was bad. It was one of the main reasons why this Browns secondary was so awful last year, right? The personnel wasn't great, but the communication was even worse. Now in training camp, you can really practice it and you can get some things down, but you're not really stress testing it as much as you will in the preseason. And what I mean by that is in training camp, you're taking snaps at the 40, and the first team's going to get 5 plays. The second team's going to get 4 plays, and they're going to do that rotation. It's fairly consistent. So there's not really a lot of craziness going on there, or you're doing end zone drills. In the preseason, it's a lot different, right? Because the ball's live, the contact's live, the ball's moving up and down the field. You don't know when you're going to be switched out for whatever player. You don't know what packages are going to be every play. It's a lot less of a controlled environment, which means more chaos, and chaos That stress test is communication, and that's universal with all facets of life, but especially in football. But you add that element of chaos in there that's really going to stress test this communication in the secondary, and that's what you want to make sure is solid before the season starts, right? If the Browns defense does not have those communication things intact, it does not matter how many signings they made in the offseason, they're not going to be as good as you would hope. So that has to get figured out, and that's what you get to stress test in the preseason. That's something to watch. Another thing to watch, young defensive tackles. Let me point out a situation the Browns have that's currently on the verge of being a small disaster. Not a big disaster, but a small disaster. On the defensive line, the Browns have 1, 2, 3, 4 guys who are expected to be starters or contributors, right? 3 of them are actually starters. We're talking about Malik Jackson. We're talking about Andrew Billings, Jadeveon Clowney, Takk McKinley. We don't know if Takk McKinley's going to play this year. We don't know what's going on with him, but if he does come back to camp, he will be a contributor. So those 4 guys on 1-year contracts, that's not very good, especially when you're at the point in your cap history. That's not very good, especially when you're at the point with your salary cap that you're locking up the guys that you drafted, right? You don't have all this extra cap space to spend, which means these 1-year deals, they have to get replaced by young players. They have to get replaced by draft picks. And when you look at the defensive tackle room, there's not a lot of guys who are established that are young there, right? They drafted Jordan Elliott in the 3rd round. Didn't have a great rookie year. Hasn't had a great camp so far. Really needs to step it up. He needs to have a good preseason. They drafted Tommy Togiai. He's been having a good camp. You need to see it in some live snaps. Hopefully you see it. And there's Marvin Wilson, an undrafted guy who showed some promise. You want to see it from him. Malik McDowell, a guy that you kind of gave a second chance to, you want to see from. But there is a bit of an emphasis and a bit of urgency when it comes to developing young guys you can retain for not as much money long term on that defensive line. Because right now, you know, if you don't have anybody young that can step up by the end of this year, you're going to be in trouble because, again, 4 of those guys on that defensive line that are going to be expected to contribute are free agents after this year, and they're not all coming back. So you need to figure something out with that defensive line. You can't keep recycling 1-year deal after 1-year deal after 1-year deal in that defensive tackle room. You need to get some guys who are going to be here for at least a couple of years, give that defensive line some continuity, and that's going to be in the young guys that you invested in, so you'll want to see those investments pay out. So that's something to watch. That's going to be actually one of the more critical things to watch when it comes to this football team in the preseason, because again, like, what are they going to do if those guys don't pan out? Because they really have nobody locked up long-term in the interior. The next thing you're going to want to watch this year, and I think one of the more intriguing and important things, is special teams. One, mainly because you just don't get a good read on special teams in training camp. It's almost impossible. All the variables that make it really difficult to kick in the NFL just aren't really there in training camp. I really think one of the things people undersell when it comes to kickers, punting, and just field goal kicking is the wild card element of an open air stadium. And when you play in the AFC North, you're playing open air stadiums at least, 8 times with your home team, and then 2 times each versus every division game. Like, the majority of your season is going to be outside. And all of these teams in the AFC North have outdoor stadiums in cold weather cities that are next to bodies of water. Quite literally a kicker's nightmare. It's not an easy division to kick in. It's what makes what Justin Tucker has done his entire career very impressive. But it is windy next to the ocean in Baltimore. It is windy next to the lake in Cleveland. It's windy next to those rivers, in between those rivers in Pittsburgh, and it's windy along the Ohio River in Cincinnati. Like, there's no way you're going to escape from it. And the way all these stadiums are built, that they're just wind tunnels that funnel in all this random wind. It's a very difficult division to kick in. I don't think people give that enough credit that it needs. And that's something you're only really going to be able to get a good read on when it comes to special teams, especially the kickers, is in the preseason, right? Because it's the only time they can take live field goal kicks in a stadium environment. It's the only time they can do punts in a stadium environment with some crowd noise, with some people actually rushing them. It's a very different thing than what they do at practice. And also for the returners, because who's returning the kicks for this team on either part of the game, right? Punt and kick return. I have no idea. So we'll see what happens there. That's going to be interesting, but we can all find out together. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're notified so you can check my live watch along. I'm doing this week's preseason game, next week's preseason game. I'm taking a break for the third week preseason game, and then we're going to be going head on into the season. I'm going to be doing a live watch along for every game during the regular season on top of the post-game show that I usually do. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ding the notification bell as well. But that's it for this week's show. I want to thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.